Next up, I'd like to welcome to the stage Annie Ko, Vice President of the Singapore Management University, as her panel asks, what is shaping the future of data? Please put your hands together. Thank you very much.
Sharif, you're around. Yes. I'll try and catch up.
Are we on?
Yes. No, I think I have to follow.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm going to tell you this. You are going to see a master class with a group of master panelists. So, and the reason's very simple, because they have such great ideas, and after the launch of the data sharing framework by SMS Janil, we are the natural extension. So the whole session, from the framework to the trust ecosystem to the future of data, come in as a group of three. So I have three great gentlemen here. And what I'm going to do is I'm only given close to 30 minutes. So we're going to look at the issues of the future of data, but from three Ps. So given that I'm a professor, not of marketing, but of finance, I thought it would be very nice if we look at the three Ps from three angles. We'll speak about the purpose of data. I see many young people in this audience, and I want to reach out to the future of data from the angle of the purpose. Why do we have data, and why is it important? The second P, to me, is very important too, because it's about the pervasiveness of data. It has no borders, and it has to be shared. And the more we share, the greater the value. But how do you share data in a quality governance way? And I think that leads extensively into the framework. And the last piece, the reason why we have the three gentlemen here is about partnerships. And partnerships essentially needs trust. So without further ado, I'm going to go directly to the first P. And as each gentleman share with you, you will realize why they are here on this panel. Not because they look very good, but because they have a purpose to be here. So I'm going to start with you, Danny. All right? Can you share with us, given your role in Data Republic, what is the purpose of data in your eyes?
Well, I often say my deepest belief is that data is the single biggest lever for microeconomic and social reform in the next 2 decades. And I think the microeconomic reform and the social reform are equally important in my eyes. So data is perhaps the quickest way to drive material changes in the way that business functions, in terms of serving its customers, in terms of efficiency in supply chains, in terms of solving cross-industry issues. But it's also the quickest way, particularly between public and private sector data sharing, to solve material issues in society. And so for me, the purpose of data is to lift us all up and take us forward.
And actually, Danny, I didn't prepare you for this. You actually came from, he loves curveballs, I've been told. All my gentlemen here love curveballs. So you actually came from a background of being, an entrepreneur all the way. And just now you make one word. You are proud and you are delighted to be talking about data. Why?
I think data is a very misunderstood and maligned concept. But I think about data in the same way we should think about money. It's neither inherently good nor evil. It has no character in and of itself. It depends entirely upon how we use it. You can use money to give to charity, or you can use money to buy weapons. It's the same with data. Data has it's nothing to be feared. It's something to be considered.
So data has no gender, data is inclusive, data respects diversity. I'm going to come to you, David. So wearing both the digital data officer hat in MAS, what is the purpose of data in your eyes?
Well, the purpose of data fundamentally is ultimately, actually very much to build on the point earlier, is to fuel how organizations work with one another. It's to give us the ability to understand operations, understand inefficiencies, and naturally coming from a regulator perspective, understanding risk, be it systemic or be it internal.
So you make the statement when I asked for you to talk about the different points, and you said that the purpose of data you can only get to the benefits if you have truly digital data.
Yes.
What do you mean by that?
Well, and then this is a combination of a personal view, is we're still at an, I don't know if the word is evolution stage, we're still coming to grips with what data is. And at the risk of becoming semantical, is we're used to very much analog constructs. And having digitized those analog constructs, for example, think of trade, think of the fact that I'm exchanging products. But we're now in a point in time whereby we have truly digital data. And what I mean by digital data is me walking outside, capturing the GPS information of me actually walking. What is that data? What does it mean? What's the value of it? Who owns it? There are various views with respect to that. Not saying any one of them is right or wrong, but we need to start realizing that data is now coming into a new realm. And new frameworks, new perspectives, and new understandings and discussions have to have a bit on that. There's a gap there as well. There's a gap there as well is because largely we're trying to apply what we understand about ourselves into this digital realm. And this is a point that we were discussing earlier that I think it might be also important to highlight, is data is also a representation of our culture.
And I want you to hold that piece because that's something I want to explore under partnerships. Very good. So now that we know even from the authorities, data. So you notice we have two pronunciations of data. All right? There's data and data, and they are the same thing. So it's that inclusive.
We needed to disagree on something, so.
Great. Thank you. And then we'll come to Shameek. And if you look at his name and his profile, he's not meek at all. He's wearing pink. All right, so we are on the pink side, and those are the gray people. So Shameek, from the angle of the whole enterprise, from Standard Chartered Bank point of view, why is data important?
Well, it's not necessarily important to us. It's important to our customers and to our citizens. I mean, the only reason data has become so important is because of what it can do in terms of meeting the unmet needs of customers and citizens. And frankly, every organization should only be looking at data from that perspective.
But when you say unmet needs, but you are a full banking license, so what unmet needs can the bank meet?
Well, first of all, as a bank, we are the Bank of Asia, Africa, and Middle East, and our only purpose is to spread, I mean, it's literally their purpose is commerce and prosperity in Asia, Africa, and Middle East. And if you look at these markets, there are a very large number of people who are just outside financial services to begin with. But beyond that, even in established markets like Singapore, like Hong Kong, etc., if you're an SME in Hong Kong, for example, it's extremely difficult to get access to basic banking services. So I think accessibility is not just can you access it, but also the price point at which you can get it, the ease with which you can get it, that's also accessibility. And I think the only way we can make a material difference, particularly given how regulated this industry is, the only way we can make a material difference to accessibility is through better use of data.
Okay. So for many of the students in this room, they are all looking at the future of data and where we should go in to study because everybody wants tech people. You actually, before joining the bank, you worked in McKinsey, right? I'm assuming you did not come from a tech background.
I am an engineer by training, but yes, I was at McKinsey before that.
Okay, engineer is tech. Anybody non-tech here?
I'm non-tech.
And what's your background, Danny?
Well, I studied business, but I've been obsessed with data for across telco, media, banking, and the patterns are the same across every industry.
So David's the only kosher person here who is data, all right, with his machine learning PhD and his comm science background. But we'll come to you for that deep piece. We'll go back to you, Danny. So you see pervasiveness of data, and you actually said we should share. Now tell us a little bit about what does sharing data mean to you?
There's an enormous amount of insight that can be gained over any individual data asset. So any organization has a lot that it can learn and inform better customer experiences on its own. But the second you bring two different or even two of the same kind of data sets together, the amount of learning and insights and new opportunities actually increases in a non-linear way. So when we think about any of the problems we face in industry, in financial sector, when I think about the challenges of KYC, AML, income verification, expense verification, these are largely data sharing problems at their core. Fraud in insurance is a data sharing problem. So the insights that can be created by industry pooling or by cross-industry data sharing and the problems that can be solved are literally infinite. And I'm ambitious for the kind of a future that enables us to solve those problems.
So I'm going to push you a little bit. I know that Data Republic has a booth here as well. So I'm going to ask you, can you explain to the layman out in the audience, I'm sure there are a couple of lay people like me, what's the role of Data Republic?
So Data Republic is enterprise software that enables two organizations who orchestrate their activities on the same platform to govern the process of data sharing, to minimize risk, and reduce the friction that's involved in that process. So data sharing happens between organizations today, but it takes around 9 to 12 months for a single bilateral data share. The actual data science work is days within that 9 to 12 months. That's not the complexity. So we try to remove that 9 to 12 months down to 2 days between organizations. And then when you enable that, then the kinds of new ideas that they can create and collaborate on in a privacy-compliant, well-governed, risk-minimized way to continue to increase.
So you use one word in my interview with you. You say we must have sensible governance.
Yeah.
So what is sensible governance?
Well, to me, sensible governance is more about a set of principles like transparency, simple consent concepts, informed consent. It's much more about a set of principles because what I'm comfortable sharing as a data sharing concept for myself might be different to you, Annie. And I think that we should each be empowered to make our own decisions around, how we want our data to be utilized in services that we want. So it's much more about a set of principles that enterprises can determine for themselves how they want to participate, and that they can help their customers determine for themselves how they want to participate as well.
So I'm going to come to the destiny of Singapore. We are celebrating our 200th anniversary, David, all right? And all of you know that. And the destiny of Singapore lies in being an open trading community. So, David, you've got to help me out here.
Oh, sure.
All right, so we talk about sensible governance, and SMS Janil has just launched an amazing framework and platform to encourage innovation. The elephant in the room for many of the startups is cross-border.
Yeah.
How do we move cross-border remittances? How do we enable, funds flow, data flow, and goods flow? Yeah. So from where you sit, I know the MAS don't really look at everything cross-border, but how do we look at cross-border trust building? Yeah. And risk management?
No, an extremely important point. And in fact, not too long ago in the FinTech Festival, my managing director said exactly those points about data must flow. And we shouldn't let the misguided notions, and absolutely governance is important, absolutely security is important. And I'm saying that because to me that's a hygiene. But we shouldn't let the misguided notion of security prevent us from having that openness, just like of trade, of data effectively. And I even go to, and I add the word personal view to the extreme of my perspective is that data should be shareable by default. Naturally should be shared with security, governance, transparency, and consent. But it should be done by default, be it within organizations or across organizations. Because otherwise, how do you get the flourishments of the potential output? How do you get the possibility of creating new innovations? It doesn't work that way. So it doesn't mean that there's certain situations which we don't do it, but we're cognizant that certain outcomes cannot be achieved. So we strongly believe in that. We're working with like-minded other sovereign entities in having those conversations in how to facilitate three things, if I may. Similar to the point raised in the earlier panel, trust. We need to trust one another. And I really want to emphasize that point. And in that...
So wait, I paused here a little bit.
Please.
So which countries do we trust most?
Singapore.
I love all my children.
It's across the world, right?
It's across, and perhaps let me give you a bit of color when I say about trust. Because as I was alluding earlier, data is about culture. And from different perspectives and different views, from being a human basic right to being a commercial value to being a overarching national sovereign entity. We have different views. So we need to trust one another with respect to our own frameworks. And how do we collaborate with one another? The second one is how do we provide for operators, for players, for institutions, assurances that things not going to rapidly change just because of things happening overnight. And the third one, we need to change our minds. And we need to think about things differently in terms of data sovereignty. We have embassies all around the world. Why can data have the same type of construct? That it's still my sovereign data. It just doesn't happen to exist with me. These are things that we need to explore, that we need to trial out, we need to experiment with, because ultimately, and the starting point is, for a digital economy, data must flow. It's as simple as that.
So about 2 nights ago, Prime Minister actually mentioned that we have a network that we are working on to look at the digital governance framework and the amount of trust that can be built. And interestingly, it started with Chile and New Zealand. Yeah, so it's like a group, and then we start to extend, and we build greater trust with a bigger community. Right. So I'm going to move to you, Shameek. So from Standard Chartered point of view, how many countries are you in right now?
This is a difficult question because it keeps moving, but it's somewhere in the somewhere above 60 is kind of solid numbers. Yeah.
So regardless of whether governments have built cross-border agreements, you have been operating for many years.
160 here, more
160 years, so very good. Can you give us a use case example in which regulations are still operating and yet you could still move data across countries? Do you currently have such a framework?
I don't think it's a... So to the point you made at the start, nations are coming together now at the very starting point of talking about data, international data flows. The reality is we've had to operate, as have many other banks, as a global bank. In our case, a multi-local bank for decades. So it's not one use case. Actually, most things for our bank do require cross-border movement. It might not require cross-border movement of personal data. That's different. But if you're a bank, how do you know how much exposure do you have in Indonesia and Singapore, in India? How do you know how much liquidity you hold? How do you know which transactions that are flowing through your network are leading to fraud or financial crime implications? So these all need to be there. So I'm thrilled that governments, particularly led by our own, are working towards data flows across. But I would say for most of you who are from the private sector here and have international presence, we've got to work despite the lack of government flows today. And I think it needs to start from us. Ultimately, whether you as customers or I as a customer trust an organization depends on whether we take our responsibilities to protect and respect our customers' data seriously. Can't just be lip service. You have to put serious amount of focus and attention on that. So for us, we look at 5 different things that we need to do beyond security. I'm not even covering security. There is obviously data privacy. There is cross-border data access rules. There is the ethics of data and increasingly AI. There is aspects around how long you can keep data, which is records management and retention. And, of course, there is data sharing. And you need to have all of these built in, because before you start talking about let's have the government of Nigeria or India or Malaysia trust whether we can move data, we've got to convince them that you have the internal processes and the ethics and the code of conduct to actually respect these requirements. Only then, I think, we are deserving of our customers' trust and of government's trust. So we must do our homework. We can't just say, open up the boundaries because everywhere we need to share data. We must show that we are responsible trustees of our customers' data.
I love it. So you actually say the roles must start at home, and you have to be custodians of customer data seriously.
Yes.
Were there occasions when people were not serious custodians?
I won't comment on that.
Okay, fine. I thought you wanted
I've got my regulator here. So.
Yeah, your regulator.
I think it's a learning journey, and we're learning how to be better custodians.
So trust takes time to build. The code of conduct of trustees and custodians also take time. So now I'm going to come to you, Danny. You actually managed to get the governments, the airlines, the banks across 3 countries, Australia, US, and Singapore, to take part on your platform. Can you share how do you get such partnerships to come together?
So, Annie, you're very generous describing a larger customer base than we currently have today. But certainly where we started in Australia, we position ourselves as purely infrastructure. Agnostic, open platform, anyone can participate and have full control and full transparency. And it's funny when David mentioned culture, perhaps at a market level, I see the same thing at an enterprise level. Different enterprises in different industry verticals, whether they're the first placed or fourth placed, all have different cultures as it relates to data as well. And the first response is generally, why would I ever share my data? It's so valuable. There's a journey that everybody goes on a data maturity curve, and the ultimate place they end up with is, my data's only valuable if it's being used, if it's actually useful in production, applications being built on top of that data. Otherwise, it's just a cost center. So it's been a lot of education of people about the nature of data, the value of data, the role of data, and the utilization of data, because it's very difficult to understand in the abstract, and everyone wants to understand what's the use case. And when you're a platform and you don't build the use cases, you say, what do you want to do? and so that's part of the challenge. But as you start to introduce people who are at the right stage of maturity, they start to find their first idea, and that quickly leads to 5 more ideas, and then to 10 more ideas. And that's really our objective, is to spark the imagination. Now we're seeing, we've had as many different use cases as we've had data exchanges on our platform. So I really do see a literally infinite number of applications of data across industries.
Can I?
Yes, so David, I want you to add.
Yeah, I was about to interject, and I just want to add something about the role of data, and also to the question of the panel, what is shaping the future of data? And I think there's a very, very important element that perhaps many of us are implicitly taking it. We need to come to the realization also that data is not technology. I cannot begin to emphasize, while it heavily is dependent on technology, it leverages technology, et cetera, it is not technology. And perhaps not being existential and talking about culture is also realizing that it's not like any other asset class, that, oh, we just bucket it there and all good. A lot of times we think of, let's think of use cases, Data is indeed a continuum, it's a representation. The moment we reach this not even pinnacle, but mid-level point where we start thinking of data more broadly, we start thinking of it as non-technology, the possibilities are absolutely phenomenal.
Very good. We started asking about the purpose, so now we are almost finishing up with back to the purpose. So Dave, for you, you said earlier that actually data is a proxy for culture.
Yes.
And I'm going to ask you, so as we look at this platform that SMS is made available for innovation to take place, how do we make sure that people come together, collaborate, innovate, and yet don't have cultural clashes?
So it's actually the starting point that I mentioned. They don't see it as tech. Because if you start as tech, it will be tech versus tech. I'm right, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're right. If we start with the pinnacle point that it's about culture, it's about people, we will start with respect. And we'll start with understanding of how can we synergize and harmonize our different points of view to be able to collaborate, to be able to share, to be able to transfer, to be able to achieve. And just like trade, it's not about a superimposition of one perspective over another. It's about how do we come together to achieve a common outcome. And I believe we all want that common outcome. We want that innovation. We want the possibilities. But it starts with, we need to see what data really is.
So that brings me nicely to you, Shameek. So many of my wonderful startups out there, and they will say you're a 160-year-old institution. How can they work with you?
Sure. 4 things. First, sharing of data. Sorry, not sharing. sourcing of data. So if you have data that is of interest to us, or we have data that might be of interest to you, that's the first one. Obviously within SMS's framework and so on. Second, actually sharing of data. This is different from actually providing or taking data. This is very simply people like Danny creating the guardrails under which we can share data more effectively. Third, doing something with that data. I mean, 160-year-old organizations have lots of tech and data scientists inside, but they love to, and I'm sure you know, we work with Silent 8, for example, here locally. We love to work with startups in specific areas where you take that data and do something useful with us jointly. But then the fourth one, which is very nascent, and I know Danny is going to probably announce later today something on this, is how do you create the infrastructure to allow customers and citizens to have better control over their data? In a very crude way, MyInfo is an example of that. But what we need is a way of having personal data wallets that allow individuals, and for that matter even corporations, to control in real time or not in real time who has access to their data. If you take it even forward, we need ways in which individuals are remunerated for the use of their data, much like YouTube videos getting remunerated. So that is not something we can do alone. That's not something David or Zeke there can do alone. We need an entire ecosystem of startups that can achieve that. Those are, I would say the first three, there's lots of players there. The fourth one, I've met like 2 or 3 in the world at the moment who are even in early stages of thinking. I think all of those are very important areas of partnership.
Very nice. So we only have 43 seconds to go. So I'm going to finish with the last P, people. People comes with talent. Everybody in this audience says we have so many startups in Singapore. We cannot find the talent. Do you have a solution for us? Danny.
What we hope to make available by networking enterprises together is an access point that lowers the cost and friction so that startups with ideas in data, AI, ML can quickly and simply test those ideas on real-world data.
And so we might even do a datathon, right?
Exactly.
Something that you were talking about with Melbourne Business
We've done
School.
some fantastic datathons with universities in Australia on real-world data with incredible results.
So Singapore Management University is very open. So we will talk with you on this. Then, David.
2 elements. One is collaboration and partnership. The second one, while, I have to say it because that's my background, data scientists are very important. Please keep on hiring. The other one is data has to be everyone's equity. We need to move away from this misnomer that to do data, to understand data, to achieve the outcome from data, you need to be a data scientist. Everyone can do it. And organizations need to gear themselves to be in that kind of mindset.
Thank you. And Shameek?
I'm sorry, David stole my idea, but just to build on that.
But you can always come up with a new one.
No, I'll use the same one. Because I think why people say there is a shortage of talent is because when we think of talent for data, we think people with geeks like David or engineers or data scientists. But actually, we need philosophers. I'm actually going to try and hire somebody for, if there's a philosopher in the room, we're actually going to hire somebody for ethics with a philosophy background. We need designers. We need experts in credit decisioning, insurance, underwriting. Sociologists.
I've hired sociologists.
Behavioral socialists, sociologists, absolutely. We need socialists as well, but sociologists would be better. But we need various kinds of people in order to make Singapore grow into what it wants to become. We're never going to be the tech center for the world. We're not Silicon Valley. But we're many other things. And we need to exploit the full potential of Singapore, not just think of data scientists and engineers.
Very nice. Ladies and gentlemen, you know, we started with the 3 T's. We talk about trust, technology, and talent. And the reason's very simple. We cannot talk about the 3 T's without the 4 P's. So the 4 P's were people, public, private, partnership. And this is the panel where you took away all those lessons. Can we put our hands together for my rock star panel? Thank you.
Thank you very much.